Hey Dory, how's it going?
It's going pretty good over here. How about you, Redbird?
Pretty good, pretty good. So I've been getting some questions in. I was wondering if you could help me out.
That would be really handy because I've been getting some questions too. So how about we see if we can work together and solve as many as we can?
Sounds like a great plan. So I'll go first.
Okay.
So the first question that I have is how long does it take sunlight to get from the sun to the earth?
That's a really interesting question. So then we have to look at a couple of different things. First, we need to figure out how far away is the sun. And it turns out it's pretty far. It's, man, a lot of kilometers. It's over 149 billion kilometers away. So if you change that into meters, it's even huger. So we have that information. Then we have to figure out how fast does light actually move. And it turns out it goes pretty close to 300 billion meters every second. So if we kind of put this into a calculation, we can figure out based on the distance and the speed, how long or what the time would have to be. And it turns out that if you calculate it, it actually rounds to 499 seconds or about 8 and 371 thousandths of a minute.
Wow. Pretty
Yeah.
fast. Pretty fast.
So here's my first question that I got from someone. Do all fish lay eggs?
That's an interesting question because the answer is actually yes and no.
Both?
Yeah, both. All fish have eggs. They have what's called roe,
Oh,
but not all fish lay them in the water. Some fish carry them internally in their body until they mature. So if they're born live, they leave the mother or the host live. They're called live birthers or live bearers, and then those that don't just or lay eggs and they hatch. Examples of live bearers include guppies, platies, mollies, swordtails. Now, if all these fish names don't mean much to you, it's okay because there's a lot of different fish out there. But then what's interesting is those fish that keep the eggs in their body, there's a couple different ways we can look at those too. There are those that kind of hold the eggs just in their body in a pouch and the eggs do their own thing until maturity. And those are called ovoviviparous.
that's a big word.
Yeah. And then there's viviparous fish who the eggs actually receive nutrients and blood and oxygen from the host, the thing that's carrying them. Now, most fish, the female carries the eggs if they carry them. There are some species who actually the males carry them.
Really?
Yeah, so things like seahorses and pipefish, the male carries the eggs, and their bodies actually give the nutrients and oxygen and blood supply to the eggs until they're birthed.
Wow.
And then there's a family of fish called cichlids who brood their fish. They take the fry and house them in their mouths. They're called mouth brooders. So it's a pretty complex thing, and there's a lot more information out there if you just go out there and look for it. Okay, the next question I have is, what's the best way to prevent a sunburn from happening?
Ooh, sunburn. Man, I already got burned once this year, so
Whoa.
I had to do some research myself to make sure that I'm less likely to get burned. So
Okay.
in my research, I found a couple of things. One, you want to try to avoid being outside during certain times of the day. They actually recommend that between, say, 10 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you want to try to avoid the sun as best you can, if only because that's when the sun's rays are the strongest, and therefore you're most likely to get burned. Something else you want to be mindful of is the idea of surfaces that reflect, because that light will bounce right back at you. So you want to be careful around water, sand, concrete, even surfaces that are just painted white, because anything that reflects back will, again, burn you.
Makes sense.
Something else you could play with is sun protective clothing. Have you noticed that there have been a lot more of these long sleeve bathing suits and stuff like that lately?
Yeah.
There's a reason for it. They're actually making these fabrics that are really lightweight and loose fitting, so they're kind of cool, but at the same time, they're woven tightly enough that it won't let the sun's rays actually get through your clothes. So you won't get
Okay.
burned all over. It's awesome. Let's see, what else could we do? We could also wear hats, so that would go all the way around, preferably the ones that will cover your ears and the back of your neck. The wider the brim, the better in that case, but even a baseball hat can be helpful. Other things you can keep in mind would be sunglasses, because sometimes we don't think about it in terms of protecting our eyes from UV damage. Usually people are just like, oh, I can't see, I want to wear my sunglasses. You can actually make sure you buy sunglasses that have protection against both UVA and UVB rays. That'll help you out the best. Other than that, say that you don't have any of that clothing available for whatever reason, no big deal. You can still wear sunscreen. But there are some things you have to keep in mind about the sunscreen to make sure that you won't get burned. One, apply it quickly and early. You don't want to go out and then put it on, because then it's not going to work yet. Yeah. You need about a half an hour in advance if you can. Okay. So that's one thing you want to do. Before you even buy the sunscreen, you want to keep in mind that there are certain factors that are important to keep you safe. For one, you want to make sure that the sunscreen protects against both UVA and UVB rays, because again, both of those can cause damage to your skin, and we don't want that. So aside from that, you can look for things that are waterproof, because again, if you sweat or if you go in the water, it's going to end up washing it all away, and then if you don't reapply, sunburn. And finally, we really want to take a really close look at that SPF factor. That number that they write on the bottle stands for the sun protective factor. If you get one that's 30 or higher, you're going to be much better protected than if you're using anything smaller. It turns out that 97% of those rays are actually blocked if your SPF is 30 or higher. Otherwise, you're more likely to get burned.
Okay.
The only other big thing with sunscreen is to make sure you reapply it constantly. Otherwise, you're going to end up still getting burned like I do.
Right. Makes sense.
So I've got another question for you. What is lightning and where does it come from?
That's a good question. We tend to create lightning a lot on our own in a very miniature form, believe it or not. So in the winter and fall, when you scoot your feet back and forth a lot really fast, and then you reach out and you zap someone on the ear or touch a doorknob, that's kind of the same thing. It's just a giant distribution of static electricity. So we are able to create it on a very tiny little level, zap, because if you do that in the dark, you'll actually see your lightning arc. It's kind of fun.
Oh, that's cool.
Or you can, watch nature do it on a great big scale. So what's happening is inside a cloud, you have all the particles that make up a cloud, and they're slamming into each other, rubbing against one another, the same way your feet are scooching on the floor. So, but they're doing that, billions and billions of times over. And what's happening is electrons, negatively charged particles, are collecting in the lower levels of the cloud, where the positive remains are going to the top of the cloud. And one of the rules of the universe is that opposites tend to attract, especially when you talk about positive and negative charges. So you have this giant negative charge up there in the sky in a cloud. Well, down in the earth, all these positive charges are kind of starting to collect underneath that negative charge until you get to a tipping point, and bang, all that negative charge is released in this big lightning bolt that comes down to the ground. And that's what lightning is that release of that electron. The same way when you zap someone in the ear, or a doorknob, it's that release of the negative charges, because that negative and positive want to come together and cancel one another out. So it's the same idea. And you can get into a lot of different kinds of lightning that are out there. There's the traditional big lightning bolt that comes down to the ground, or forked lightning, or ball lightning, or heat lightning, and all this other stuff. And we'll have some resources in the show notes that you can explore further about different ideas of lightning as well.
Cool.
Well, Dory, thanks so much for all your help. Getting these questions answered for our explorers, I think, is going to be a really big help.
I totally agree. Thanks, Redbird, because, we work together to figure these questions out, and now everybody has the information that they need.
That's right. And if explorers have further questions, they know they can send them in to us at ask@starbase-ct.com. And until the next time we have a Ask Starbase, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Take care.
You too. Bye, Redbird.